Hey everybody, thank you for joining us early. We're excited to have you. We're going to be starting in just a few minutes.
All right, everybody, we're going to give it just one more minute. Hello everyone, my name is Lauren Shelberg with GTH DNA. Welcome to our Rapid DNA nationwide webinar, proudly sponsored by GTH DNA and our learning platform Go Rapid DNA. We are thrilled about the future of Rapid DNA, and today's agenda is designed to provide valuable insights for law enforcement agencies and crime labs exploring or advancing Rapid DNA programs. Today, we have 7 distinguished speakers who will discuss the latest advancements in Rapid DNA across the United States. The chat box is open for discussion. If you have any questions that are not answered during the chat session, we will do our best to respond to your questions via email as soon as possible. Now, I'm excited to introduce our host for today's event, Paul Butler. Many of you know Paul from his incredible law enforcement leadership, customer service, attitude, empowerment presentations across the country and abroad. Paul has a deep law enforcement background. During his 27 years in law enforcement, he's been a public servant, training officer, sergeant, crisis negotiator, chief of police, and chief deputy. Paul has the distinction of serving as the official master of ceremonies for the FBI National Academy Associates. Paul, we are so happy to have you leading our webinar today. What a treat for all of us.
Well, Lauren, thank you, and I am excited to be here. And folks, I'm excited that you've signed on today. It shows that you are interested in being on the front end of the wave of Rapid DNA that is going to change the game in law enforcement investigations. I did 27 years on the job, all in the great state of South Carolina. And I want you to know I work with some of the absolute best professionals in the world. And so many times I can remember during these investigations where we had evidence that I knew would have been useful in the investigation, but our crime labs have always been overworked. Not because they're falling behind, it's because they're so good that everybody wants to send that stuff to the crime lab. Let me tell you this. Had Rapid DNA been available, it would have moved us forward tremendously. So while there are many people who could be on this webinar today to speak more clearly about the benefits of Rapid DNA and the technology that exists for it, there is no one who could be more excited to see that law enforcement has finally caught up with the needs of the everyday officer, with the investigator who's out there trying to solve these cases, exonerate the innocent ones, but make sure that the criminals who commit these crimes are brought to justice. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you, at this time in law enforcement, we stand at a crossroads. What we have is an incredible opportunity to use this Rapid DNA to exonerate the innocent, but hold those who have committed these crimes accountable. And that's what we're going to move forward with today. I heard a quote a long time ago. It said that every crossroads of the future stand 1,000 guardians of the past. And what that means is that you're probably going to be met with some pushback when you talk about doing anything new in this world. But what we cannot do is allow this moment to pass us by. Whenever you talk about Rapid DNA, you'll hear people say, well, it's impossible to get the funding. It's going to be difficult to get the support. But let me tell you this, today we're going to unlock some of those answers for you. And as you stand at that crossroads and meet those 1,000 guardians of the past who try to hold you back, what we're going to do is teach you how to be able to move forward boldly into the future and take Rapid DNA into every investigation and increase the credibility and effectiveness of law enforcement throughout the nation. So today, you're going to hear from some incredible subject matter experts, but you're also going to hear from some passionate warriors who are pushing this forward, who are the voice of victims, and who are going to be the voice of the law enforcement officer out there trying to make a difference every day. I ask you to lean into this, make your notes, ask your questions, but do not let this opportunity pass you by. I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you for being a part of this movement that is going to take place and a part of the future that all of us have been waiting for. So first up, we have my dear friend Ashley Spence. She is a true inspiration, a survivor of a brutal crime, but she has turned that tragedy into triumph by helping others and dedicating herself to forensic DNA policy advancements across the nation. Ashley established the DNA Justice Project and now works throughout the country to motivate action to use DNA to its fullest potential. Ladies and gentlemen, you welcome my friend, Ashley Spence.
Paul, it is such an honor for me to be here with all of these incredible experts, including yourself. I cannot stress how important this initiative is, and I am so excited to see us start to roll this out more and more all across the country. Do not remove the pillow from your face until I am gone. And do not tell anybody, because I will be watching you. And if you do, I will kill you. These were the haunting last words that my serial rapist said to me before he escaped from my bedroom on a night that shattered my life into pieces. I was 19 years old, so excited to begin my sophomore year at Arizona State. I went to bed that night, as I always did, or so I thought, feeling like I was safe in my own home. But this night I wasn't. In the middle of the night, while I was asleep, an intruder entered my apartment, crawled into my bed. I will never forget the moment that I felt him press the pillow over my face and tear off my clothes from the waist down. It still gives me chills. I remember thinking, this is a nightmare. This is a nightmare. Wake up, Ashley, wake up. But not only could I not wake myself up, I could not move and I couldn't breathe. And it was in that moment I knew I'm gonna have to fight for my life. I began to try to scream and move my body just to get him off me in every way possible, and it was in that moment that I was nearly killed. He smothered my face so tightly and began to beat me so severely, and I frantically moved my chin up and down, side to side, but there was no air, and I thought, I am going to die. And I had two choices. I continue to fight, and I die, or I have to let it happen to try to live. And I wanted to live. So for hours throughout the night, in every unimaginable way possible, I was violently raped and tortured. The entire time I could not see the face of the horrific man that was committing these crimes against me. But I am so fortunate. I am here today. I survived. But he got away and I never saw his face. Despite his threats against my life, immediately after the attack, I called 911. I waited in the parking lot, and I will never forget the moment that I see the law enforcement officer drive up, and we locked eyes, and he just mouthed the words, "Oh my God," when he saw me standing there with blood dripping down my entire body. You know, everything at that moment became a blur. But my first responding officer, Officer Williams, he saved my life. He was kind and he was gentle. He made me feel believed, and I began to trust him. And I remember he said, we need to act quick. He knew I did not see this man's face, and he said, we need to go have a forensic examination done to have evidence collected off your body. And I knew nothing about rape kit examinations. And I remember the first thing I said was, I cannot go anywhere. I need to shower, I need to brush my teeth, and I need to change. I feel wretched, I feel disgusting. And he just compassionately said, I'm so sorry. You can't brush your teeth, you can't shower, but you will be safe. So I went down and had forensic examinations done, and you know, I worked day and night with detectives. I had incredible detectives on my case too, and they said they had 50 people voluntarily give their DNA. and we had to wait for months to get them back, but unfortunately there were just no leads. You know, the fear was paralyzing. It became too much for me. I had to drop out of school. I moved to Newport Beach, California, and it was there in 2010. 7 years later, I get the shocking phone call. There is a DNA match in my case. After 7 years. Ironically, I moved to Newport Beach to escape this monster, but in reality, I moved to the very city that he lived. I lived on 40th Street, and when he was apprehended, they caught him on 41st Street, just 1 block away from where I was all those years. He was trying to break into a home where young women lived. A police officer saw him. He ended up resisting the officer in an altercation, and thankfully, California is one of 19 states that at the point of felony arrest, DNA is taken. So really quick, let me zoom out. All 50 states collect for the point of felony conviction. 31 collect at certain violent felony arrest and burglary, and 19, California, thank goodness, collect at the point of all felony arrest. I thank God every day that my perpetrator was caught in California. So they took him down, they took his fingerprints, his photographs, they took a minimally invasive cheek swab that was found to be reasonable under the 4th Amendment. There is a case called Maryland versus King in 2013. They submitted it to our national DNA database, CODIS, and guess what? It hit a match back to mine and multiple others all those years before across state lines. My rapist was a serial predator. I wasn't the first, and 7 years went by, I wasn't the last. Because of the incredible team working my case, forensic DNA and collection policies, and technology advancements, my perpetrator is in prison now for 137.5 years. I am so fortunate to have justice, but all victims deserve justice. Whether you are a victim of a violent crime like myself, or whether you are wrongfully accused of a crime you did not commit. I meet with victims all over the country that are still waiting for their justice. But sadly, due to outdated collection policies or lack of the implementation or funding for DNA technology, justice will continue to be withheld. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Rapid DNA is changing the future of the criminal justice system as we know it. In just 90 minutes, we can identify or eliminate suspects. This is groundbreaking, and we should all be fighting for this. I know firsthand what it feels like to have to wait for answers. For 7 years of my life, I lived in paralyzing fear that my serial rapist would come back to fulfill his threat and kill me. I am now a mother of 2 young children. That, combined with my lived experience, has made me incredibly passionate about advancements in DNA technology, and specifically the use of rapid DNA. Because when we are talking about solving violent crimes, time is of the absolute essence. When we are talking about saving the lives of innocents that are falsely accused, sitting in our prisons, every minute counts. And when we are talking about preventing the rapes and the murders of our children, every second matters.
What an incredible and inspirational story. Thank you, Ashley, for being willing to share it, and also being willing to have the courage to continue to make a difference for the people who deserve that type of attention the most. She's right, Lauren. That technology that she and so many others like her have cried out for to make these results faster and to get justice served quicker, it already exists. It exists here today. And what you're going to do is learn about that through this Rapid DNA webinar. It's going to help you achieve the goals that Ashley has so eloquently explained to us that makes the biggest difference in lives. Ashley has a book out, Silent Witness by Ashley Spence. If you want to learn more about her and her incredible journey, purchase that book. You'll be glad you did. Next up, we're fortunate to have with us Lisa Hurst. She is the Director of North America for GTH-DNA. If you have ever dealt with forensic DNA policy, legislation, or congressional or state funding for forensic DNA, you have likely heard about Lisa Hurst. For 25 years, she has been the go-to person for these matters. She's going to give us a quick overview of Rapid DNA, its applications, and the latest from the Washington, D.C. office and the states on where police can secure funding for Rapid DNA.
Thank you, Paul. The potential for Rapid DNA to have a significant impact on law enforcement investigations and exonerations is so exciting. And in fact, it's more than just a potential. Rapid is already in use throughout the country. Nearly every state has at least one Rapid instrument in use or a planned funding stream on the way. And a growing number of states are now implementing statewide systems which will put Rapid DNA instruments within a few hours' reach of law enforcement agencies in every part of their state. We'll talk more about this later, but first I'd like to start by providing a few high-level points about Rapid DNA use. First, please keep in mind that the most successful Rapid DNA programs are those that are coordinated with an accredited DNA crime lab. If your own state or local crime lab is not ready to support your Rapid DNA program, many local agencies will instead use an accredited private lab. These labs provide scientific reachback support for Rapid DNA programs because not every profile will result in a green checkmark, meaning that the DNA profile is not a good profile or it may just need additional review. Some of these profiles may still be good, usable profiles, but they do need a trained DNA analyst to review. And you'll want that support to ensure that you are maximizing the results of your Rapid DNA program. The analysis can also then provide feedback as to why your results may be failing, such as an insufficient sample, sizes, other contaminations. Obviously, this type of feedback could be really important for training purposes. I also want to mention the ASWAB BSWAB protocol, which has been recommended by scientific working groups. This process simply means that if you intend to use Rapid on crime scene evidence, always take 2 swabs. The first swab, the best swab, goes straight into your chain of custody to be sent to the crime lab and wait in that line for testing. The second swab, the B swab, goes into the Rapid DNA instrument for your presumptive lead in 90 minutes. Also, bear in mind that at this time, Rapid is recommended for single source samples only. Samples that contain mixtures of DNA, so rape kits are a great example of this, or really low levels of what we call touch DNA, these are not recommended for Rapid DNA testing right now. Please send those samples to your crime lab, or at least ensure you are using an ASWAB BSWAB collection process. But again, it is important to speak with your crime labs and the vendors as well to ensure responsible and effective use of these systems. One of the applications that we're not talking about in great detail today is DNA database enrollment at jail booking stations. In 2020, the FBI established guidelines to allow states that have appropriate arrestee DNA collection laws to use Rapid for immediate offender searches of the National DNA Database System called CODIS. Imagine that, an immediate search of the National DNA Database while that arrestee is still in your custody. To date, there are 2 states, Florida and Louisiana, that have enabled Rapid enrollment for their states, and there are another 3 to 5 states that are actively working to this end. There is a significant information technology upgrade required for this enrollment, and if you believe you live in a state that allows arrestee DNA collection for inclusion in the state's database, we strongly recommend that you reach out to your state crime lab to understand what their plans may be for supporting this type of Rapid use. But where investigators really get excited is with the use of Rapid on forensic evidence. Most commonly used are simple one-to-one identifications where evidence from a crime scene or a sample from unidentified remains can be tested using Rapid DNA and compared to an existing profile, also tested using Rapid from a known individual. You'll hear later today about some of these applications where homicide and other accident or disaster victims have been identified using Rapid. giving investigators, surviving families, and our communities the answers they need during difficult times. And of course, the one-to-one would also include simple crime scene comparison against identified suspects, potentially providing a 90-minute confirmation or exoneration of suspected individuals. A growing number of local agencies have also taken use of Rapid to the next level by creating their own local databases for searching, providing investigators with quick leads when time matters most. And later today, you'll hear about a growing number of states as well that are supporting their law enforcement customers by enabling statewide access to that state's DNA database of offenders for rapid DNA evidence searches. This is an exciting opportunity that has shown a lot of promise already. And you'll hear about an even more exciting opportunity coming in 2025 for rapid DNA evidence searches of CODIS, the national DNA database that includes more than 23 million DNA profiles from offenders and other unsolved crimes. So a lot of existing opportunity to expand use of rapid DNA in investigations, and even more opportunity on the near horizon. As you hear more from the upcoming panel of Rapid experts and law enforcement users today, you'll probably start to think, sounds great, but how do I pay for it? Or you may wonder where to start if it seems your state or local lab has not yet begun to offer rapid DNA support. There are a variety of opportunities for advocacy and for funding support from local, state, and federal agencies. And Ashley Spence and I will talk to you again at the end of this presentation to give you some options to consider. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Lisa, for sharing those insights on rapid DNA and the many uses that are available for it. We look forward to your conversation later with Ashley to talk about some of the funding sources available, because that's exciting technology and we want to make sure it gets in the hands of everyone out there who's interested. But right now, we're going to switch to a conversation with two of the greatest professionals in the business today. We have Jeff McCormick. He's the Executive Director of the FBI National Academy Associates, and we have Sheriff Fred Herron of Bucks County in Pennsylvania, who is a leader in the rapid DNA technology world. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having us.
Sheriff, the first question I have for you is, you established a rapid DNA program in Bucks County almost immediately after the technology was first available in 2017. You've had the distinction of being the first local police department in the country to operate a rapid DNA program. Why were you such an early proponent of rapid DNA programs? How did you get on board so quickly?
Well, you know, it's an interesting question. And when I became a police officer in '87, all I wanted to do was kind of prevent crime, solve crime, help people. I mean, the same old answers you hear from any police officer in their initial interview. But in 2017, when Rapid became available and I just happened to see it, I'm like, this actually does what I've always wanted to do. And that is to lock up bad guys quickly, and also to prevent future crimes. So to me, in March of 17, when this came available, I was able to get some local funding through the state, and we got our first machine in Bucks County. Now we have actually 3 machines in Bucks County, 3 instruments. So to me, it was a no-brainer. And to be able to get DNA results now in 90 minutes, as opposed, unfortunately, and no fault of their own, the labs we have in this country are phenomenal. They do a great job. But in Pennsylvania, the labs were taking sometimes up to 18 months to get results back on property crime. And that was my biggest problem. I border the city of Philadelphia. For me and a lot of other police departments in Bucks County, it's the property crime. It's not the homicides and the sexual assaults. That's not my problem that I have. It's the everyday crime. And the labs were just overworked in Pennsylvania, just overworked. But now with Rapid, we could do testing in our police station, getting results back in 90 minutes.
Right. Sheriff, that is incredible, and I love what you highlight right there, because I've done some work recently with the NYPD crime lab, and I was recently in Colorado with their Bureau of Investigation with their lab speaking, and they're incredible professionals. They're not slow because they're bad, they're slow because they're so good. We have a tendency to nearly overwork them because they are so effective. And I love what you mentioned there, is that if you can address crime on the lowest level possible, on the vandalism level, on the burglary level, a lot of times it prevents bigger crimes.
It does, and we've seen that over and over again. We've done some studies now. We've seen some results where if we're getting people right away, it stops them committing other crimes. Rapid DNA technology really takes the word serial out of crime.
But now, Jeff McCormick, you are the executive director of the FBI National Academy Associates. I have to give full disclosure, I'm a proud graduate of the FBI National Academy,
Yes, sir.
Session 220.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for your work there. That has just been a key in law enforcement leadership. That really made my career something extra special. But you are also with the FBI.
Yes, sir.
And before that, local law enforcement in Georgia.
I was.
All right. Now, tell me what your thoughts are on how some of this works. The DNA from the time you've watched it unfold here, rapid DNA.
Sure. Well, I mean, we'd mentioned, when we started in law enforcement, early 1990s when I became a police officer. And of course, this technology didn't exist, but having seen how this technology kind of evolves, it reminds me of, fingerprint technology, when that was a revolution in law enforcement. It was a watershed moment. Police officers were able to solve crimes by using fingerprints. I think rapid DNA is the new fingerprint technology. When police officers now, they have kind of a love-hate relationship, if you will, with the DNA technology, right? They can go out and they can collect the DNA, but then they have to ship it off to the crime lab, and they sit and they wait for the results to come in. And while they're waiting, crime is still going on. They've got new cases that come on, and they have to put more time and more energy into what's the hot new case that's going on right now. And so when that DNA finally comes back, all those days and weeks and months later, they've already kind of moved on to some other things, and they have to put that on the back burner now and bring this old case forward, if you will, and then start using those results to try to solve those cases. So having the rapid, where you don't have to wait for those results to come back from the crime lab, I think would be a game changer for local law enforcement.
It is, because one of the things I do worry about, just having my limited exposure to the crime lab side of it, is they're just inundated with cases. I mean, they do such a great job with that, but you worry about that compassion fatigue and things like that, as they have to go through so many to get through them. A big case comes in, it's easy to get excited. But we have to remember every case is a big case to some victim, and certainly some investigator.
Exactly.
And I think that rapid DNA could possibly take some of the pressure off of the labs.
That's why I'm so excited to have the opportunity to talk with you about this rapid DNA stuff.
Well, and if the greatest resource to combat crime is cooperation, I think that's where we stand on the precipice of making the biggest difference with rapid DNA, is as that cooperation spreads across the country and we start sharing those resources. My hat's off to the FBI for allowing that, because that'll be the game changer, I believe. And with all of your members, I know they'll be excited, but I think with every law enforcement officer in America is going to benefit from this, and including anyone in the lab. I mean, would you agree with that?
100%, yeah. The FBI is a leader in law enforcement, in the United States and around the world. Now we're at the point where, with rapid DNA, the Bureau is putting together some standards, which will be available to kind of help local law enforcement understand how to use rapid DNA, to help crime labs understand how to integrate it into their databases and systems. And I think that those standards coming out from the FBI, this now is the time when you'll see rapid DNA really start to take off.
So that's my point, is that this has reached that level that they see only the good and the benefit. So once that approval came, to me, that's an endorsement for what the sheriff's been calling for since 2017, is that universal coalition to say, how do we implement this nationwide, hopefully eventually worldwide, and start watching law enforcement and their citizens benefit across the board.
Absolutely.
I love that. I know that makes you proud to see that. Sheriff, I do have one question for you, though, that is incredibly interesting, because your program didn't rely on having access to a database.
We did not have access to the CODIS database for this particular program. In Pennsylvania, there's 3 CODIS labs, and they are overwhelmed and overworked. They're great people, they're doing a great job, but they don't have the staff and they don't have the capabilities. They're not funded the way they should be to keep up with the daily needs. So, in our last job, the individual cut herself. We were able to get blood from the crime scene, and we wound up with a suspect. We matched it, and next thing you know, not only did we clear that one burglary, but it linked to about a dozen more. And I'm not sure we would have ever got results back through the state lab because it was a burglary. It was a property crime, and they're so backed up with homicides and sexual assaults that they don't have time to process this. But what is the cost of all these stores getting burglarized? So we looked outside the box, and using Rapid and our own database and the one-on-one comparison, we were able to make an arrest. Not only did we stop her crime spree, but she was also suffering from drug addiction. But she got clean, and that was the other good part of the story. It's priceless.
Well, Sheriff, you and I have talked about that before, and I love your take on that. Is there are a lot of people committing crimes that if they get caught early enough, they're salvageable.
Yes.
And there's a way to kind of get them turned back and be productive members of society. And you think if we had to invest 6 months or 8 months or 10 months in a lab result to do that, well, maybe you don't weigh that out quite as equally. No. But if all you had to invest was 90 minutes to possibly turn someone's life around, to take someone who is being suspected of a crime and let them sleep easy at night, the family has more confidence in law enforcement, and certainly society ends up with more confidence in us too.
For sure. I mean, people, they see DNA, they see it on television, but now we're using this. This is real time. Incredible. This is stuff we never imagined. When I came on in 87, this was not even a concept. But we're also using it for simple thefts from retail establishments. We're able to get crime scene DNA, get into our database, and we get a suspect and put that into our database, and it matches. So you're seeing incredible results here. The only thing better than 90-minute DNA is going to be 80-minute DNA whenever they get out with that. But right now, if 90 minutes is the best we got, I'm going to take it because it beats 18 months.
I promise. And I love that take. I agree. Somewhere there's somebody working to get that number down even lower. And what you want to do is make sure we don't miss this opportunity waiting on the next opportunity. Right. I love that. Jeff, the National Academy Associates represents people from all size agencies, correct?
Absolutely. Yes,
so the smallest of the agencies, what type of benefit do you think it would most be to the smallest of agencies? How do they get left behind sometimes?
Well, I think we've talked about that a little bit. 80% of the law enforcement agencies in the United States are 10 officers or less, and they're not going to have their own crime labs, So having the ability to purchase something like this, with the assistance that's out there for the funding and everything, being able to bring that into their departments and be able to solve the crimes is a game changer. Not only because now they don't have to wait in the queue behind everybody else that's at the crime lab with, high profile cases or, more victims or a bigger monetary loss, but they can still address the problems in their own communities with their own resources by having this in here. And something that you guys had touched on also that just kind of wanted to expand a little bit. You mentioned, eliminating suspects. When you start an investigation, everybody's a suspect, and as an investigator, you winnow that suspect list down through the process of elimination. Just the amount of time and resources that will save investigators to not have to go down a road to eliminate somebody because they already know in that 90 minutes that this person's no longer a suspect. But think about also the angst that saves the person who knows they didn't do it, and yet just because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, or they're associated somehow. Now I'm a suspect in this crime. Being able to go home and sleep at night knowing that you've been eliminated as a suspect because you didn't do it, and now to know that the police know you didn't do it as well in 90 minutes as opposed to 6 months waiting for your name to be cleared is I think is very important to keep in mind also. Yep.
Everybody ought to be able to sleep better with Rapid DNA except a criminal.
Yeah.
And that makes me feel really good about it.
It's about stopping crime, but as Jeff said too, it's about exonerating the innocent. We had an incredible case where we arrested a man for sexual assault. She positively identifies the guy. He's in the area. He's a known sex offender. His girlfriend lived in the same complex. He had no alibi. In this particular case, the detectives came to me and said, something's not right here. So we wound up running him through the rapid machine with evidence from the scene. It wasn't him. And then she wound up recanting this guy that it was him.
My goodness.
If there's no DNA, this guy's still in jail. And we got him out. I don't even know what the price is on exonerating this, but the stories are never ending. They go on and on and on exonerations, on human identification, on stopping crime in its tracks. It's endless.
Now, Sheriff, what has been your experience when it comes to these cases once they start making their way through the court process?
Yeah, it's a great point because everybody always thinks, there's going to be trials on this. There are no trials on this stuff. Defense attorneys, once they know that their client's DNA has matched the victim or the crime scene, these are all guilty pleas. The court system is not bogged down with lab people doing presentations, and we're not having to run DA swab. These are all guilty pleas. It's got to be about 99% of these cases are guilty pleas. Very, very, very few ever see the inside of a courtroom with a jury or a waiver trial. So it's no brainer.
So now we're talking about a benefit to law enforcement, a benefit to the crime lab, and a benefit to the court system?
And a benefit to the court system. It's the perfect trifecta. The only thing better was not to have the crime to begin with, but as we talked about, that's coming.
How did you get that type of funding? What's the process? Give us the shorter...
Back a couple years ago, the community funding came out through Congress, and the earmarks, as they're known, and I made a phone call. Started with a phone call to our congressman, Brian Fitzpatrick, who's ex-FBI. I said to him, Congressman, we're doing this DNA stuff. We've been doing this in Bucks County now since 2017. There's an opportunity for us to expand our program. His then chief of staff called me and said, Congressman likes your idea. Can you give me a one-page summary? Heard back maybe a couple weeks, maybe a month later. The congressman likes this. He wants to submit that. We're going to push this through. You're going to get notified when to submit the formal grant application. Now, I've done grants for a long time. There are a lot of paperwork. And then I got this one, not so much. Very simple to fill out. I'm talking about I spent like an hour on it. Submitted it, and we got funding for, you ready? $750,000 to get this with very little paperwork. And then next thing you know, the money's ready for wire. Purchased our equipment, submitted that information to the feds. A day or two, $750,000 wired into our account. And what does it mean for my residents in Bucks County? It means the safer county. We've had a 42% reduction in burglary. We've had a 53% reduction in forcible rape. We've had a 51% reduction in robbery. It's irresponsible not to ask your congressman or not to look for funding for this type of equipment because it's solving crime, it's putting bad guys in jail, and it's preventing tomorrow's victim.
And all of it starts with a phone call.
It all starts with a phone call.
Well, and I hope the people of Bucks County are as proud as I am of the leadership that I'm hearing come out of there. You and your congressman are to be applauded for your work today.
He's a visionary, and that's what you need. And my guess is if you call your congressman and tell him what this does, talk about exoneration. That's important. It's not just about locking people up. Talking about preventing crime. Talking about getting people off drugs and getting them to help. It's a win-win-win for everybody.
That's true, because even if you had somebody in the Congress who wasn't excited about being pro-law enforcement, they should want this technology more than anyone.
Absolutely. This is a win for everybody, no matter where your mind is in the world. This is a win for everybody.
It's certainly been a win for us to have you here today.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Sheriff. Jeff, we're going to finish up with a question for you. When you're talking about that, you work on that level now where you're probably having to be in contact with a lot of folks in the political world. How do you recommend they go about doing that? How do you reach out to your congressman and do things like that?
Well, like the sheriff said, I think it's important to remember that your local officials, they're running the government, and the government is at its basic basic function, I think, about the rule of law, and the rule of law is what makes the playing field more level for everybody. They would love to hear from local law enforcement, get that local law enforcement perspective. So I think, just using your voice as your local law enforcement people to reach out to your elected representatives, your members in state legislatures or the national level, and talk about what your needs are. They're going to want to hear from you because they do support the rule of law for their constituents. But at the same time, as important as individual voices are, and that's one of the great things that the National Academy of Associates does, is it creates a unified voice through the network. But reach out to your state law enforcement organizations, your local, your state sheriff's association, your chiefs of police, PBA, whatever the organization might be, and kind of start that collective conversation, because when we speak with a collective voice, obviously it's easier to be heard. And so I think that's an important thing also. But I also want to make sure that we don't forget about the crime labs. This is new technology for the crime labs, just like it is for everybody else. But I think by having the conversations with your crime labs and making sure that they understand your perspective as a local law enforcement agency and why you're interested in this, and give them the opportunity to share whatever concerns that they may have. I think having those conversations and getting it all out in public, or in front of everybody, that solves a lot of problems before they start, just by having those conversations. So that would be my advice, is just, talk about it. Absolutely.
I'm proud that you're our voice in this area. Thank you for being here today. And I hope everyone out there listening on that webinar is energized to pick up that phone and make one of those calls. You mentioned about the crime lab perspective. Well, you are in luck, because when we come back, we're going to have my foremost authority on it. Ray Wickenheiser is going to speak about the crime lab perspective on implementation of Rapid DNA into all databases.
Thank you, Paul, for that very kind introduction. I'm very excited to talk to you today about the phenomenal forensic service improvement opportunity before us today. And that is FBI, as of later this year, will make the National DNA Index System available for rapid DNA searching. So you heard Fred talk about one-to-one, that is comparison from the crime scene directly to a suspect. What we're talking about is the availability to one-to-many, that is to the national database and over 20 million profiles to compare to. So what Rapid DNA brings is speed and mobility, but to make this happen, it has to be under the umbrella of accredited crime lab. So I'd like to take a moment to talk about our mission at the crime lab particularly, but as law enforcement, those folks who support law enforcement. Our job is to take that evidence from the crime scene and maximize the value of that evidence. So you think about what we do, first thing is who did the evidence come from? So we look to make associations and then provide that investigative lead to our law enforcement partners to help them solve that crime. We have tremendous specificity with DNA, more than we've ever had for any technique that goes out to the crime scene. Akin to what we do at the crime scene, if a call for a house burning down came into the fire department, having a backlog of the crime lab is like the response from that fire station saying, yes, we'd like to get out to your fire, but we can only get there in 3 days. Clearly, the damage is being done while we wait, so speed is critically important. So it's one thing to talk about an illustration, but think about a real crime. These are homicides, sexual assaults, and robberies, but even property crime, all crime is important to the victim. A victim who doesn't know who their assailant is, somebody who has broken into their home, they're going to live in fear and suspicion. How about a suspect who is wrongfully accused, waiting to have their name cleared, wondering if they might be a miscarriage of justice? Or a family with a missing loved one, wondering where they are, or waiting for that identification? How about investigators when a dangerous perpetrator is at large, jeopardizing public safety in their jurisdiction? How many potential victims should be put at risk while they wait for a lead to try to solve their case? So in all those instances, how about as little time as possible? Should it be 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days, or how about 2 hours? That's the reality of what Rapid DNA can bring. Before I talk about Rapid DNA at the crime scene, I'd like to talk about a specialized application of Rapid DNA, as Lisa had mentioned previously, and that is a mass disaster response capability. With the mobility and speed that Rapid DNA affords us, we also get that specificity of DNA. As we know, when we're identifying individuals, potential victims of a disaster, we need reliable data as a basis for identification. So having a rapid DNA network of instruments gives us the capability of mobilizing those different nodes to assist each other in going to or near the crime scene. So not only can this help with getting DNA from those unfortunate victims, but particularly the families of those victims, when they go to the Family Assistance Center, that they can get a positive ID while they're there, as opposed to law enforcement and others having to track them down. Rapid DNA has already been used in a number of disasters, such as the Conception boat fire in California, the Paradise Fire, the Florida Surfside condo collapse, and for Puerto Rico, identifying victims of Hurricane Maria. So even a 9/11, God forbid, rapid DNA can provide that national readiness. So I'd like to pivot back to the lab and specifically talking to those crime lab scientists who do DNA right now. So speaking to you as a forensic scientist and somebody who's worked for decades to support investigators and investigations, rapid DNA is going to be, or has been real, but will be even more real later this year with access to the large database. It's not as sensitive as the DNA that's done in the lab. It cannot be taken to court, whereas the lab DNA under accreditation can, but it took us years to build the database and this system, and it is awesome. Certainly the lab can solve this case, but here's the reality. We're behind, we're victims of our own success. We have backlogs in almost all labs with cases waiting to get started. These urgent cases, they're very disruptive. They come at the front of the line. We love doing them, but they turn our labs upside down, and they come at the expense of other cases. I'd like to remind everyone, we are not our technology, we're not our car. We drive the car. Even with self-driving cars, we still tell the car where we want to go. We decide, we operate it. And as the scientists, we go to court, we explain the technology, and we talk about how we apply it to solve the crime. So we don't invent the technology, but our job is to shop the world for the best technology and bring it home to help solve our cases for our victims, for our public safety. So we have built a phenomenal car, a tremendous system in the national database and our statewide databases. But now, later this year, with rapid access to the national database, we can leverage that great system and add the aspects of speed and mobility. So we have a chance to buy a super fast motorbike for some kinds of samples, uses that same successful technology, but it's going to get us to our destination a lot quicker and with no disruption to our existing system. So boom, we get this answer of who did this crime faster. We have that flexibility of mobility, and we get that national disaster response capability. So how are we going to do it? Well, as we mentioned before, you need an accredited lab partner. So we have a couple options which I'd like to touch upon. One is you do have the option of standalone databases, which these states who've gone first are doing. Or my preferred option is option 2. You use the National DNA Index System because we've invested in that massive database. There's over 20 million profiles. You want to try to match everyone, but we have to collaborate. We need more resources because this is an extra add-on service, not to be disruptive to the already overburdened champions at the crime lab. But I would liken this to adding a fast food drive-through to our high-end restaurant. So we don't match hunger with one size top shelf meals every time. We're hungry, we need something quick. We can go through the fast food line, we can get some French fries and a burger. It's not great, but it tides us over until you get that fuller, high-quality meal by running the second swab. So the implementation steps, and we know this in the crime lab, it is new technology, but we deliver new technology to help serve our investigators. We've got to acquire that technology, we've got to integrate it, then implement it through running validation. So certainly IT is a big step because this has to be secure, these instruments have to talk to each other, we have to access the profiles remotely, review them. So we have to assess instruments, make sure that they're going to run. We validate those by running some number of samples to make sure they're operating. Then we can do a lesser validation or performance check by running some number of samples on those same other models of instruments once we know the first model is working. And we have to spend some time in training. So certainly there's some training in the crime scene and sample recognition. We've got to ID those single source samples because those are the samples that we're looking for. And we split those samples. We absolutely want to use a small portion for rapid, the rest for the lab so that we can follow up that with a full profile from the accredited lab. And there will absolutely be a number of samples that will go directly to the lab mixtures, small quantities, degraded samples. So recognizing those, absolutely we have to train on instrument use, but this is a very straightforward instrument. It has been very ruggedized and can run, again, single source samples, but very easily. So you do that training, you do a competency test, there is annual training and proficiency tests to show that your folks continue to be proficient in the technique, and we've got to document all that. So we know the steps, we know the drill. At the crime lab, this is very doable. We're going to look at the experience of 6 crime labs who've gone before us and allowing access to their offender databases. That is Arizona, Connecticut, Kentucky, Missouri, Oklahoma, and soon to be Pennsylvania. And specifically using Connecticut as example. And with us today, we have Cheryl Carrero. Cheryl?
Thanks, Ray. It's good to see you today. Hi, I'm Cheryl Carrero. I'm the Deputy Director and DNA Technical Leader of Forensic Biology and DNA here at the Division of Scientific Services in Connecticut. I'm here to talk about our Connecticut Rapid program that we have for law enforcement agencies. We've been doing this since 2021. We search our copy of our state convicted offenders against crime scene samples that officers are trained to come in to kiosks that we have around the state to run their samples. We have 9 locations strategically placed across the state. And then the lab handles what happens after they put the sample in, and potentially can get them investigative leads. Our program has been very successful. We have a 32% hit rate in the sense of investigative leads. We have about 500 plus officers trained to run our system. About 99 agencies in Connecticut. Everyone really, really appreciates this program. And in a minute, you'll hear Doug Harris talking about how CODIS is going to be able to be involved in the crime scene portion of Rapid, which I'm super excited about. And, just here to tell you that we really, really encourage other people to look into this type of program, because our job is to help investigations and get it to them as fast as possible, instead of them waiting weeks or months for a simple lead. So I wanted to thank you for having me, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of this presentation. And if you ever need any help or questions, please feel free to contact me. I'm always able to help.
And to talk about Missouri's experience with Rapid DNA, we have Brian Hoey, who is the Director of Missouri State Police Crime Laboratory System. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Ray. Good to see you again, my friend, and happy to be logging on here from the Missouri State Highway Patrol headquarters in Jefferson City. It's great to be joining such a great webinar. Look at that audience. Look at the attendance. Good gosh, that's a lot of folks. As you mentioned, Missouri is one of the 6 states that got a head start to allow crime scene evidence to be tested on Rapid DNA and be searched against criminal databases. But let me tell you why the Missouri State Highway Patrol was an early adopter of Rapid DNA. As Crime Lab Director, I work with my team to understand the needs of law enforcement. Our crime lab, like most crime labs, have long backlogs, and law enforcement knew Rapid DNA was out there, and they knew that Rapid DNA could give a result on single source samples from crime scenes within 90 minutes and have the results back in a day. They were wondering why it was taking us so long to get their DNA cases done. And they began seeking Rapid DNA solutions. So we decided to move forward and develop a Rapid DNA program in the state. And boy, am I glad we did. Since developing our program, we've had great success. And presently, we are realizing a 30% hit rate. Our MSHP officers are thrilled with the program, and in just short order, we're getting ready to partner with all law enforcement agencies in the state of Missouri who will be able to come to our facilities and use our Rapid DNA instruments with our officers and search against criminal databases. As Cheryl also said, I want to invite any crime laboratory listening here today to reach out to me if you are thinking about moving forward with Rapid DNA. Before I sign off, I want to give a quick shout out to my friend Doug Harris from the FBI. You'll be hearing from Doug in a few minutes about the big news that the FBI is going to be opening CODIS to crime scene samples from rapid DNA instruments. As I said earlier, this is a huge step in our science, and that many states are probably waiting for this guidance before they begin their programs. Congratulations, Doug. You have been a great partner to us in crime laboratories with DNA and databases for many years. And I couldn't be more thrilled for you and the FBI moving forward and taking this big step with Rapid DNA and helping get Rapid DNA programs started throughout the United States. Thank you, Doug, and thank you to the FBI. And thank you for having me. So have a great day, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So when you think about the potential that rapid DNA is to the crime scene, think about what is the worst thing that a perpetrator can possibly leave behind at the crime scene. How about his wallet? Think about a suspect dropping biological fluid is even better than them dropping a wallet at the crime scene. Somebody can drop a wallet inadvertently and claim, hey, I just dropped my wallet. But this is body fluid. This is semen, saliva, blood, touch DNA on incriminating locations like a weapon handle. So when you think about it, this DNA has been dropped at the crime scene, and now it's our job to try to use that to solve this. But help, I can't speak DNA. I need a DNA translator to ID the suspect's name. Great news, we have a large translator system at the lab. And it also does DNA whispers, minute quantities of DNA, and multiple people talking over each other, like mixtures. But now we have a portable DNA translator that works in under 2 hours. So some of the DNA at some of these crime scenes are shouting at us in a single voice, telling us who committed this crime. Do we want to provide the answer to our investigators in 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days, or 2 hours? Answer it. I'm asking you, champion this additional quick response and mobile DNA capability. Thank you for your kind attention and for everything you do for our victims and families. And thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you so much, Ray. You have really summarized the next phase very well. Of course, the next phase being to allow local law enforcement to test crime scene evidence on rapid and compare those results to state or national databases. The 6 states that have already moved forward with state-only criminal offenders are truly the trailblazers. Those examples shared from Connecticut are incredible. I'm not sure why all states have not yet done this, but folks, it's going to get even better. As Ray mentioned, we are about to learn how law enforcement will not just be able to search state databases as they do in those 6 states, but all of CODIS throughout the country. As most of you know, CODIS is controlled by the FBI, and you are about to get the details on this from the FBI coming up in our next segment. We are extremely honored to have with us today Dr. Bruce Badoli. Bruce will be serving as a special guest correspondent with us today to conduct the interview of Dr. Douglas Hares, the FBI's lead for Rapid DNA. If you are a forensic scientist, Bruce Badoli needs no introduction. But for all of the others out there in the audience today, Dr. Badoli is the person most credited for building the scientific foundation of the United States' world-class DNA program at the FBI. His work has had a huge impact on public safety, not just here in the United States, but throughout the world. Ladies and gentlemen, over to you, Bruce. That was fantastic. Lauren, I am so proud of the FBI for the relationship they have built with local law enforcement. They recognize that police want and need to be able to quickly search crime scene evidence against the CODIS network of 20 million criminal offenders. So what did they do? They took action. And in just a few months, this dream is going to be a reality. But as Ray, Bruce, and Doug all have reinforced, it will take action now by our state crime labs to move the new FBI programs forward. Pay attention, folks, because this is the segment where you are going to learn the specific details of how you can obtain the resources necessary to fund rapid DNA programs and what police and labs should be doing to advance a state or national plan to search crime scene evidence tested on rapid against the database. Back over to you, Ashley and Lisa.
Thanks, Paul. You all in the criminal justice field, you are my heroes. Every day you work with victims and surviving families on what is often the very worst day of their lives. And I know you know that time matters. It matters to your investigations, it matters to the victims you're helping, and maybe more importantly, it matters to those in your community who may be victimized next unless this guy can be stopped. 90 minutes. Imagine bringing answers to those victims, to your communities in just 90 minutes. I am so thankful for being given this opportunity to talk to you about Rapid DNA. And now I would like to ask you for help in moving these programs forward. If you don't live in a state that has a rapid system, then you can begin with one-to-one matching right now. This will position you to be ready for state and national DNA database searches when those pathways are open. But I do understand that resources are often limited, and implementing a program like this can pose its own funding hurdles. Luckily, Lisa is here to share some ideas with you for funding.
Thanks, Ashley. If you're a local agency, then of course, local funding is always best. But local funding is not always easy to come by. Potential local options include things like drug asset forfeiture money, police and community benefactor associations, and of course line items in local city and county budgets. However, local government funds may be much easier to access once you've been able to demonstrate results with Rapid. So how do you get that program going? At the state level for state funding, we encourage agencies to at least reach out to your state administering authority for criminal justice grants, which you can find on the NCJA website. These offices are great sources for information on upcoming state grant opportunities as well as any federal funds that are administered by a centralized state office. Typically, these grants will be a competitive process. You don't have to hire a grant writer, but you do want to put your best arguments forward. Ultimately, state and local funding for Rapid DNA needs to be part of the solution. As more rapid DNA testing is moved out of the public labs and into local law enforcement agencies, it would make sense to have state and local governments provide some offsetting funds. This needs a legislative champion, and I know Ashley wants to say something about working groups.
Absolutely, Lisa. A great first step would be to form a working group, ideally at the state level, and in fact, this has become the recommendation from the FBI. These working groups need to include labs and law enforcement together. And I would strongly recommend including other players such as information system professionals, prosecutors, and state or local legislators as well, because you may need them to champion policy or funding changes that the working group identifies. Working groups can be formed informally or through legislation or even executive orders if needed.
And lastly, there are federal opportunities to be aware of, which may be a great way to get your Rapid DNA programs going. Currently, federal grants provided by the U.S. Department of Justice do have a requirement that resulting DNA profiles must be CODIS eligible. So these grants are only an option right now if your state has or is working on a Rapid DNA booking station enrollment program, or if you're an accredited crime lab and the instrument is being used inside the lab and under existing quality assurance standards. But With changes to CODIS, the rapid DNA evidence searches, these federal grants may be a viable option if your intent is CODIS participation. Again, you will need a public lab's cooperation and support to be allowed to search CODIS, so do not delay in reaching out to your state or local lab if this is of interest to you. A few of the federal grants to look for are the Burn JAG Assistance Grants, the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Grants, and if you're a crime lab, the Capacity Enhancement and Backlog Reduction Grants. You can also consider a few of the grants administered by the Department of Homeland Security. These are especially good for agencies that are medical examiners' offices, or at least have a cooperative agreement that could be used with the medical examiner's office. These grants include Homeland Security grants and the Urban Area Security Initiatives grants. Lastly, but most importantly, I want to talk to you about federal earmarks. To date, around 50 law enforcement agencies throughout the country have successfully pursued earmarks in the congressional appropriations process to fund their rapid DNA programs. This funding can be really helpful in overcoming the higher startup costs associated with establishing a rapid DNA system. The process is relatively simple, but can take a year or longer to complete, so the time to get started is now. The first step is to get your application documents together, understand what your program might look like, and begin securing community support letters, which are a required part of the process. Sometime around the spring, and maybe as early as February, Congress will open its online application portals. The application is relatively simple and includes general project narratives and broad budget justifications. After the applications close, congressional offices will begin their internal processes for selections, and then the Appropriations Committee in Congress will make further adjustments to the list of programs to be awarded. And that's it. If your project has been included on that list published by the committee, the money is yours. Once Congress completes the final spending package for government operations for that year. This process can take a bit of time, and then of course there will be other U.S. Department of Justice grant paperwork to complete before the money is finally released. The full process can take a year or more, but again, if you're interested, the time to get started is now.
I really hope you'll be able to use some of these ideas from Lisa to begin a rapid DNA program in your jurisdiction. With rapid DNA, you can drastically reduce that long wait and get the investigative leads that you need now to solve these crimes. Law enforcement, please speak to your state or local crime lab leaders now about gaining access to the state DNA database and to CODIS. And do not be dissuaded if they do not have a plan. This is not a small project, and they may need to know of your interest and support to get it moving. Labs, you hold the keys to CODIS, and you are essential just as you were in my case. We literally cannot do this without you. And I know firsthand many labs already can feel overwhelmed by the mountain of cases already waiting for your attention. But this is so important. Please consider prioritizing a plan for statewide support for rapid DNA, as other states have already done. Look to your partners in law enforcement to secure the policy and resources that you may need to make this a reality. And I would be so honored to help in advocating for rapid in your state. If you are interested in pursuing working groups or other legislation to better enable rapid DNA, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or my foundation, DNA Justice Project, at the support email below.
Okay, folks, I know you had a lot of information put out there today, but here are the things I need you to remember. Rapid is already here. This isn't a dream we're talking about anymore. It's already located in over 100 locations around the United States, and it's growing more every day. The United States Congress and the federal government has already been very generous with helping local law enforcement get started with rapid DNA. As Lisa mentioned earlier, the #1 requested technology to Congress by local law enforcement over the last 3 years has been for rapid DNA support. I encourage you to follow the advice of Lisa and Ashley to go ahead and request this funding now. And even without access to state or national databases, Rapid is having a major impact. Sheriff Herron showing a 40% reduction in property crimes. That's unbelievable. The databases are coming through. In fact, we have learned that states have already started by opening their criminal offender databases to evidence tested on rapid DNA by local law enforcement. These states should be commended for their vision and leadership. But folks, the crown jewel of searching for evidence tested on rapid DNA against offender databases is really just about to begin. As the FBI stated, in just a few months, the final rules will be published and the path will become more clear. But let's remember, for evidence to be tested on Rapid and then be searched against the over 20 million criminal offenders will require a policy decision from the state crime lab to be able to move forward. We're at the end of our webinar today, but it's not the end of the challenge that we are here to give you. The folks who've spoken here today, they've had incredibly impactful stories. What they have is incredible expertise, and GTH-DNA has the ability to guide you through this process. If you've been sitting out in this audience and you're wondering how to make a difference, we have the answers. All we're going to do is ask you to reach out, ask for some help, look for a little guidance, and then you become the leader that everybody has been waiting for. I encourage every state lab and every local law enforcement agency to start meeting now to advance the Rapid DNA plans that the FBI has cleared the path for. Folks, we talked earlier when I started about how at every crossroads of the future stand 1,000 guardians of the past. Today, you're standing at that crossroads. And there'll be a lot of people who give you a lot of advice on why we can't move forward and why we ought to just keep doing it the way we've always done it. But ladies and gentlemen, the future is here, and you're part of it. Just remember that in the time that we have spent on this webinar together, you could be having those DNA results printed out and maybe having one less criminal on the streets for your community. Good luck. God bless you. Thank you for attending today.
And that wraps up our webinar for today. Thank you to all of our speakers, our incredible host, Paul Butler, and everyone who joined us today. We hope this information is helpful as you consider the issues related to advancing rapid DNA in your jurisdiction. We encourage you to visit gorapiddna.com, where you can find additional Rapid DNA policy and program information. If you have any immediate questions, you can email me directly. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you so much for being here.